The wind howled across the frozen valley of Montana, carrying with it a whisper of desolation. Snow fell in thick, steady curtains, blurring the tree line and swallowing the sound of Jack Merrin's pickup truck as it crawled up the narrow mountain road. Jack, a man in his late 30s, had a face carved by both weather and war. Short dark hair streaked with premature grey, a strong jaw shadowed by stubble, and eyes the colour of cold iron. Those eyes had once seen too much: fire, sand, and blood. Now they looked only for quiet. Beside him sat Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a black and silver coat and a faint scar above his right eye, the mark of a shrapnel wound from Afghanistan. Rex was the only living soul who'd been there when Jack almost didn't make it back. The road ended at a clearing where an old gas station stood like a wounded relic. Its roof sagged under the weight of snow, windows cracked like veins of ice. A faded sign swayed in the wind, the letters barely readable: Merrin Fuel Stop. Jack turned off the engine and sat in silence, his breath fogging the air. This inheritance from Major Alan Kearns, his former commanding officer, felt more like a ghost's message than a gift. Kearns had been the kind of man who believed in order, duty, and second chances. He'd saved Jack once, when Jack's anger nearly cost a civilian's life overseas. But the Major's sudden death had reopened an unease Jack thought he'd buried. Rex pressed his head against Jack's arm, as if sensing that grief had followed them here. When Jack stepped out, the snow crunched beneath his boots. The cold bit through his worn leather jacket, the same one he had carried since the war. He walked toward the station's entrance, every step echoing in the hollow quiet. The lock was rusted solid. With a grunt, he forced it open. The door moaned like something alive. Inside, the air smelled of oil, rust, and time. Dust covered everything except a single patch near the counter. Fresh footprints, small but recent. Someone had been here. Jack's instincts flared. He scanned the room the way a soldier scans a battlefield, his pulse steady but alert. Rex growled softly, ears twitching toward the back of the building. Jack followed the sound into the rear hallway, where a trapdoor lay half buried under debris. He crouched, brushed the dust aside, and found faint scratch marks around the latch, as if someone had tried to open it recently. "You smell that, boy?" he muttered. Rex's nose quivered. His fur bristled. There was something metallic beneath the floor, something that didn't belong in a forgotten gas station. Jack tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Beneath his calloused hands, the cold metal vibrated faintly, like a machine asleep. A tremor of unease passed through him. Some part of him, the soldier, the survivor, recognized the silence before danger. He backed away, breathing heavily. Outside, the wind rose again, shaking the building's weak frame. Jack stood in the doorway, watching the grey wilderness stretch endlessly before him. This was supposed to be peace, Kearns's last gift, a place to rest. But standing there, Jack knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. He looked down at Rex, whose amber eyes burned with tension and instinct. The dog turned toward the trapdoor and growled, deep and low. Beneath the snow and steel, something waited. Something Kearns had wanted Jack to find. The wind outside had grown louder, groaning through the trees like a living thing. Snow pressed against the windows, blurring the edges of the night, while inside the gas station, the only light came from a small lantern flickering on the counter. Jack Merrin sat near the stove, his back against the wall, eyes staring into the orange glow. His rugged face, roughened by years of dust and gunpowder, was drawn tight in thought. He hadn't spoken in hours. Even Rex, the large German shepherd with a black and silver coat and scar above his brow, seemed subdued, lying with his head between his paws. The silence was thick, almost watchful, until the first metallic clang echoed beneath the floor. Jack's head snapped up. The sound came again, faint but distinct, as if metal scraped against metal somewhere deep below. He stood slowly, the chair creaking under his weight. His instincts sharpened in an instant, that old soldier's awareness that danger never truly died. It only slept. He grabbed his flashlight from the counter, the beam slicing through the dimness. Rex rose, ears pricked, muscles taut, eyes fixed on the ground. "Easy, boy," Jack muttered, though his own voice trembled. The sound wasn't the building shifting. It was deliberate, timed, and eerily steady, a rhythm too controlled to be natural. The station was breathing. He followed the noise toward the back of the room, where the old floorboards were warped and darkened with oil stains. Kneeling, he brushed away dust and debris until his hand struck cold metal. It was a hatch, small, rectangular, built flush with the floor. Its surface was covered in rust, but along the edge, Jack noticed faint scuff marks. Someone had tried to open it recently. His heart pounded harder. He hooked his fingers under the handle and pulled, but it didn't budge. The cold from the steel seeped into his skin. For a moment, he just knelt there, listening to the low hum beneath the wood, like a whisper from the past. Rex began to growl softly, pacing circles, the fur along his spine raised. Jack retrieved a crowbar from the wall, the same one he'd used to break the front door days ago, and wedged it under the hatch. The metal groaned in protest as he forced it open. A sharp rush of stale air burst out, carrying with it the scent of dust, oil, and decay. He coughed and leaned closer, shining the flashlight down into the darkness. A narrow ladder descended into a small chamber below, lined with steel walls that shimmered faintly under the light. It wasn't large, just enough space for one man to stand upright. At the center sat a black iron safe, its surface dented and pitted with age. Beside it lay an old photograph, its edges curled. Jack picked it up, brushing away grime. The image froze his breath. Major Kearns, younger, smiling, surrounded by a group of soldiers. His soldiers, the men who had died in Darband. Something inside Jack cracked open. His throat tightened as the old memories surged back. The gunfire, the radio static, the smell of burning sand. He turned the photograph over and found a folded slip of paper taped to its back. In Kearns's familiar block letters, it read, "Open the safe with the day we lost Darband." Jack's jaw clenched. That date had haunted him for years. The day 6 brothers in arms died, in what the government had coldly called a training mishap. His pulse thudded in his ears. "You knew, didn't you?" he whispered to the photo. Rex whined softly, sensing the storm in his master's chest. Jack knelt before the safe, his fingers trembling as he touched the combination dial. The war he thought was over had just called him back. The morning broke cold and brittle, the kind of winter dawn that turned breath into smoke and silence into something heavy. Jack Merrin drove his old pickup down the winding road toward town, the truck groaning under the weight of age and salt. The sky was a washed-out grey, the kind that gave no promise of sun. Rex sat in the passenger seat, his thick coat dusted with frost, head resting on the window, eyes watchful. Jack's mind, however, was far from the road. All night he had stared at the safe in the bunker beneath the gas station, his hands shaking as the memories of Darband clawed back into his chest. There was something in that metal box he wasn't ready to see alone. The town of Caldwell's Point was little more than a cluster of buildings scattered along a frozen main street. A diner, a hardware store, and a general supply shop that smelled faintly of sawdust and kerosene. Jack parked beside the shop, his breath fogging in the frigid air as he stepped out. Inside, the heater buzzed weakly, and the bell over the door jingled. Behind the counter stood Laura Hayes, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp hazel eyes and hair the color of burnt copper tied back beneath a wool cap. She had the lean, restless build of someone always chasing answers. Her face bore the quiet fatigue of sleepless nights and cold truths. "You're Merrin, right?" she asked, her voice low but direct. "The guy who inherited Kearns's place." Jack stiffened. "Who's asking?" he said. Laura smiled slightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "A reporter. Someone who knew Kearns better than most." She led him to a corner booth at the back of the diner next door, where the smell of black coffee mingled with fried bacon and the murmurs of morning chatter. Laura spoke in short, measured sentences, the way people do when the truth is sharp enough to cut. She told him that Kearns had been digging into a military money laundering network run by Alastair Kane, a businessman with too many friends in uniform. Kane had been funneling military resources into private contracts, and when Kearns got too close, people started disappearing. "He trusted you," she said, pushing a worn manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, blurry images of men in fatigues, stacks of unmarked crates, and Kane himself shaking hands with a senator. Jack's gut twisted. He had seen that face before, on a briefing file in Afghanistan during the months before everything went wrong at Darband. Jack leaned back, his jaw tightening. The diner's noise faded under the pounding of his heart. "You're telling me Kearns was murdered," he said quietly. Laura nodded once, her expression grim. "And now you have what he died protecting." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes dancing past the frosted glass. Jack looked down at the photos, at the ghosts of men who had died for profit, and felt that old heat rising. Inside him, the one he had buried under whiskey and silence. Rex lay by his boots, ears twitching, as if sensing the storm building in his master's chest. Jack pushed the envelope back toward Laura. "You shouldn't be near this," he said. "You've already been seen talking to me." Her lips curved into something halfway between a smile and defiance. Too late. If they're watching, they already know. Night had fallen by the time Jack and Rex returned up the narrow forest road. The snowstorm had thickened, wind slicing through the trees like blades. The gas station came into view, its roof heavy with white, the dim lantern inside flickering like a heartbeat. Jack parked near the pump, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. He couldn't shake the weight of Laura's words. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "We're in deep now, boy," he muttered. Rex barked softly, his breath clouding the glass. Then, just as Jack stepped out and began walking toward the door, a sudden flash of orange tore through the dark. The truck exploded behind him, a roaring inferno that sent snow and debris flying. The shockwave knocked him to the ground, Rex barking wildly beside him. Jack looked back, dazed, flames reflecting in his eyes. Someone had just told him, clearly and violently, that he was not supposed to open that safe. The night was heavy and breathless, the kind that seemed to press against the walls, listening. The storm had passed, leaving the forest wrapped in a thick stillness. Jack Merrin stood at the edge of the open hatch, the faint yellow light from a single lantern spilling into the narrow tunnel below. His shadow stretched across the cracked floorboards, long and uncertain. Rex sat beside him, his sharp ears flicking toward every faint creak of the building, his fur still damp from the snow. Jack's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the combination dial of the old safe. His heart beat in measured, deliberate rhythm, one click for every ghost he carried. "Darband," he murmured under his breath, twisting the numbers that had haunted him for years. The last click locked into place, and with a slow exhale, the door creaked open. Inside the safe lay 3 objects wrapped in a faded army handkerchief: a USB drive, a small external hard disk, and an old military radio, its metal surface scarred and dull. The radio's once green paint had chipped away to reveal grey steel beneath, and its cracked speaker looked as though it hadn't spoken in decades. Jack lifted it gently, as though it were a living thing. Beneath the items lay a folded paper, a single note in Major Kearns's bold handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Plug the drive into the camera. See the truth yourself." Jack swallowed hard. His chest tightened as he carried the USB to his laptop on the counter. Rex followed, tail low, his amber eyes glancing between his master and the darkness below, a silent guardian against the ghosts rising from the past. The screen flickered to life, showing Kearns seated at a desk in the very same gas station. His weathered face filled the frame, every crease a map of war and regret. His hair, once black, had turned silver at the temples. His eyes, deep and steady, stared directly into the lens as though he was speaking to Jack through time. "If you're watching this, son," he began, his voice steady but low. "Then Cain made sure I never got to finish what I started." Jack's throat tightened as he listened. "Darband wasn't an accident," Kearns continued. "Cain sold our unit's coordinates to insurgents. He traded American lives for oil routes. I found the proof. But it's bigger than just one man. If I'm gone, you finish this. Don't let them erase us." The screen went black. For a long moment, Jack sat frozen, the echo of Kearns's words filling the silence like a wound reopening. Then, without warning, the radio on the table crackled to life. A burst of static tore through the quiet, followed by a deep, unfamiliar voice, slow, deliberate, and full of malice. "He should have left it buried," the voice said. Jack's head snapped toward the sound. Rex began to growl, his fur bristling, eyes fixed on the device. The voice returned, colder this time. "Tonight you'll be buried with it." The transmission cut off with a sharp hiss, leaving the room drenched in an electric kind of silence. Jack's pulse hammered in his ears. He moved to the window, wiping the frost away with his sleeve. The distant darkness seemed alive, restless. Somewhere out there, engines rumbled faintly. Too many to count, too synchronized to be random. Outside, faint headlights flickered between the trees like predatory eyes. The sound grew louder, vehicles grinding over ice and snow, closing in from every direction. Jack's training took over. He shut off the lantern, plunging the room into shadow. "Down, Rex," he whispered, his voice a calm born of chaos. The dog obeyed instantly, lying low beside him. Jack moved through the darkness, retrieving the crowbar and loading his old rifle, the motions automatic, unthinking. Through the window, he saw silhouettes stepping into the clearing. Men in dark coats, armed, moving with precision. The gas station, once a refuge, once a memory, was now a trap. And as the engines idled and the snow fell quietly around them, Jack knew that the war Kearns had warned him about was no longer in the past. It had come for him. The storm returned with a vengeance. Wind howled through the pine trees, flinging shards of ice against the boarded windows of the old gas station. The snow outside was no longer gentle. It was alive, twisting into ghostly spirals that devoured sound and sight. Inside, Jack Merrin crouched near the window, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. The faint glow of the lantern flickered against his scarred face, revealing the cold, focused stare of a soldier back in his element. His hands moved with precision, loading the rifle, checking each bullet. Beside him, Rex, the black and silver German shepherd, paced silently, his fur bristling, ears twitching at every sound from the blizzard beyond. The world had shrunk to this station, this moment, this fight. A sudden flash outside tore through the night. Then the sound of glass shattering. A burning flare crashed into the snowbank near the entrance, hissing as it melted the ice. Jack's instincts snapped into motion. He ducked behind the counter just as a second flare smashed through a window, filling the room with orange light and the acrid scent of smoke. 3 figures emerged through the snow, moving in a V formation, their silhouettes sharp under the glow. They were tall, dressed in dark tactical gear, faces covered with black masks, rifles raised. The man leading them was broad-shouldered, his posture rigid. A professional, trained, efficient. Jack recognized that stance instantly. These weren't mercenaries. These were former soldiers, like him. "They want it clean," he muttered. "In and out." Rex let out a low growl, teeth bared. The attack began in a blur of noise and fire. Bullets ripped through the walls, splintering wood and showering dust from the ceiling. Jack rolled behind the workbench, returning fire through the shattered window. The recoil kicked against his shoulder, familiar, almost comforting. He didn't aim to kill. He aimed to disrupt, to buy seconds. His mind calculated distance, wind, angle. The same precision that had once saved lives in the desert. One of the masked men ducked for cover behind the gas pump outside. Jack saw the faint glint of a comms headset and realized they were jamming his signal. He cursed under his breath. No radio, no call for help. The old war was replaying itself in the snow. "We've been cut off again," he whispered bitterly, voice shaking between rage and memory. Suddenly, one of the attackers kicked the side door open, bursting in through the smoke. He was young, maybe late 20s, built like a runner, quick and lean. His eyes, visible behind his goggles, were ice blue and focused. Jack fired, the shot grazing the man's shoulder. Before the intruder could recover, Rex lunged from the shadows, his body a blur of muscle and fury. The dog hit the man full force, knocking him backward into a shelf of rusted cans. The man screamed as Rex clamped onto his arm, but a burst of automatic fire from outside tore through the room. A single bullet struck Rex's shoulder. The dog yelped in pain, but didn't let go. Blood splattered across the floor, vivid against the pale snow blowing through the broken door. Jack's vision tunneled. Rage replaced fear. He charged forward, swinging the butt of his rifle into the gunman's face, sending him sprawling. The man hit the floor, motionless. The world went silent, except for the storm. Jack dropped beside Rex, pressing a trembling hand against the bleeding wound. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered, his voice breaking. The dog's eyes were glassy but alive, his breathing ragged. Jack tore a strip from his shirt, wrapping it around the wound, his hands slick with blood. Outside, faint lights moved through the trees, more figures closing in. He could feel the noose tightening. Desperation took over. Jack grabbed the old military radio from the counter, twisting the dial with shaking fingers. Static filled the air. "This is Sergeant Jack Merrin, calling any friendly unit," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Coordinates." Static swallowed his words. He slammed his fist against the radio. "Come on, somebody." Then, beneath the hiss, a faint reply emerged. Fragmented, distant, but real. "Don't leave the station. Rescue inbound." Jack froze, disbelief warring with relief. For the first time that night, hope returned. He looked down at Rex, whose tail thumped weakly against the floor. "You hear that?" he murmured. "We're not done yet." The first light of dawn crept through the shattered windows, painting pale gold across the snow. Smoke still rose from the burned-out wrecks scattered around the gas station, their twisted metal glinting under the weak sun. Jack Merrin stood beside Rex, his jacket torn and blood-stained, the rifle hanging loosely from his hand. The dog limped slightly, but stayed close, eyes sharp, ever watchful. Jack's mind was a storm. Exhaustion, adrenaline, grief, and something heavier. The realization that last night wasn't random. Whoever had come for him had done so with precision. And now, as the cold wind whistled through the trees, the faint rumble of an engine approached once again. He raised his weapon out of instinct. A dark SUV with no insignia rolled slowly into view, tires crunching over the snow. The vehicle stopped a few yards away, doors opening in near-perfect sync. The first to step out was Laura Hayes, her red hair messy under a beanie, face pale, but eyes burning with urgency. She looked shaken but alive. "Jack," she called out, voice tight, "don't shoot. They're with me." From behind her emerged two federal agents, both wearing heavy tactical coats dusted with frost. One was Agent Nolan Briggs, a tall, broad man in his 40s, clean-shaven, dark hair streaked with grey, the kind of man whose silence carried authority. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, deep and calculating, spoke of a soldier who'd seen too much. Beside him was Agent Serena Cole, mid-30s, slender, sharp-featured, with olive skin and dark brown eyes that missed nothing. She moved with a quiet alertness, the kind that belonged to someone used to walking into rooms that could kill her. Inside the station, as they gathered around the blackened table, Laura explained everything she had pieced together from Kearns's files. "This station wasn't just a fuel stop," she said. "It was a covert listening post during Operation Sentinel. Kearns's unit monitored encrypted military transmissions here. Kane's people hijacked it years ago to launder communication data. Briggs nodded grimly. He used it as a black channel, he added, voice gravelly. Money, intel, troop movements, all sold off the books. Jack felt a chill deeper than the cold outside. So, Darband, he muttered. Serena looked at him with quiet sympathy. Yes, it was sold. You and your men were the price. The truth hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he couldn't speak. All those years of guilt, every nightmare, every scar, had been bought by another man's greed. As they prepared to leave, Briggs and Serena began loading the files, drives, and weapons into the SUV. Laura turned to Jack, resting a hand on his arm. "You can still walk away," she whispered. He shook his head slowly. Not anymore. The moment was cut short by a flash outside, a streak of smoke cutting through the morning air. The explosion was deafening. The SUV erupted into fire, the blast throwing Laura to the ground. Flames consumed the vehicle in seconds, the shockwave echoing through the valley. Jack stumbled back, ears ringing, vision blurring. Through the haze, silhouettes emerged from the tree line. Armed men, advancing with purpose. At their center walked Alistair Kane, tall and commanding, wrapped in a black overcoat, his silver hair slicked back. His face was calm, almost serene, like a man attending his own victory ceremony. Kane stopped a few meters away, his cold blue eyes locking on Jack. "You should have stayed buried with the rest of them," he said, his tone smooth but venomous. Jack aimed his rifle, but his shoulder trembled from the wound. Before Kane's men could open fire, Rex, bleeding, furious, lunged from behind the wreckage, his teeth sinking into Kane's arm. Kane screamed, stumbling back. Chaos erupted. Jack grabbed Laura, dragging her toward the pumps. The heat from the SUV fire warped the air, making the snow glow red. He saw Kane's men raising their weapons, and he knew there was only one way out. "Cover your ears," he hissed. He fired a single shot into the leaking gas line. The explosion tore through the world, a wall of flame roaring into the sky, devouring the station, the snow, the trees, and the men who had come for them. The first snow of spring fell softly over the ruins. The forest was quiet again, no gunfire, no engines, just the whisper of wind moving through the blackened pines. Jack Merrin stood where the gas station had once been, boots sinking into the slush, smoke still faintly rising from the scorched earth. His face was pale beneath a week's worth of stubble, the lines deeper, the eyes hollow. The explosion had ended everything, but it had also taken what mattered most. He looked at the makeshift grave he had built from old stone and twisted steel, marked simply with a piece of metal that read, "Rex, loyal beyond duty." His breath trembled as he whispered, "You saved me, boy, again." But there was no answering bark, only silence, heavy and absolute. In the days that followed, Jack moved like a ghost through what remained of his life. The data recovered from Kearns's drives had been sent to Laura Hayes, the one person he trusted to tell the truth. He'd handed her the encrypted files before the fire took the station, knowing that if he didn't make it out, she would. Laura had survived the blast with burns along her right arm, hidden now beneath a wool coat. Her fiery red hair had dulled, cut short, and her face bore the weary calm of someone who'd carried too much death. Yet her determination hadn't faded. "They'll know the truth, Jack," she had told him before boarding the transport back to Washington. "I'll make sure of it." He had only nodded, unable to find words. For him, words had become graves. 3 months later, America was no longer silent. The front page of the Washington Chronicle carried Laura's article, "The Dog That Brought the Truth Home." It told everything, the Darband betrayal, the cover-up, and the soldier who refused to let it die. The story broke through political walls like a firestorm. Congress called for investigations. Alistair Kane's network was exposed, his name erased from the ranks of power he'd built on blood. But for Jack, the headlines meant little. He didn't want justice from men in suits. He wanted peace, something quieter, simpler. And so, he returned to the woods, to the one place that had held both his worst memories and his last hope. Over the next weeks, Jack rebuilt the foundation of the old gas station by hand. His scarred palms bled, his body ached, but the work kept him steady. He called it the Kearns and Rex Sanctuary, a place for injured service dogs and veterans who needed somewhere to start again. Laura visited once, standing beside him as snow drifted between them. "You think anyone will come?" she asked, her tone soft, uncertain. Jack smiled faintly, a rare light flickering behind his tired eyes. "They will. The ones who've been lost always find their way back." She squeezed his arm, then left, her figure fading into the trees. That night, for the first time in years, Jack slept without reaching for his rifle. Dawn came quiet and golden. Frost clung to the trees like glass. Jack stepped outside, coffee in hand, watching steam curl into the cold air. Then he heard it. Faint, broken, but unmistakable. A bark. He froze, the mug slipping from his grasp, shattering on the steps. The sound came again, from the edge of the woods. Jack's heart pounded as he ran across the clearing. There, stumbling through the snow, was Rex. Thinner, limping, his coat matted and patchy, but alive. In his mouth hung a small metal tag, worn and engraved with a name, A. Kearns. Jack fell to his knees as Rex reached him, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the fur. "You did it, old friend," he whispered, voice breaking. "You brought him home." Snow fell quietly around them, erasing the footprints of the past, leaving only two figures, a soldier and his dog, at peace beneath the winter sky. Sometimes, miracles don't come as thunder or light. They come quietly, in the form of loyalty, courage, and a heartbeat that refuses to give up. Jack and Rex remind us that even in the darkest nights, God never leaves our side. He sends his signs through love, faith, and second chances. In our daily lives, may we learn to see the divine in small moments. A loyal friend, a sunrise, a whisper of hope. If this story touched your heart, share it so others can feel the same light. Leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and together, let's honor those who keep believing when the world grows silent. May God bless you, your family, and every soul still searching for their own miracle.